The number of people experiencing homelessness in Toronto increased by 190% between 2006 and 2018. It is estimated that over 9,200 are presently homeless, and that number is only expected to increase. Let's talk about shelters. Shelter service users complain of overcrowding, theft, lack of privacy, and concern for their safety. This is particularly troubling given that 75% of service users experience mental health concerns, which can be exacerbated by these conditions. 94% of service users want stable housing. Indeed, provincial and municipal policy is increasingly aimed at housing as a goal. So, what does one need to maintain housing? Well, some money, firstly, for which you might need government assistance or to get a job and keep a job, which is easier when you have a phone and ID. And what if you also need to see a doctor or a mental health professional before you can even really get to that? Or you have serious legal issues or substantial debt, serious health concerns, substance use, disability, immigration. You may be surprised to learn that most shelters lack the supports that many service users need to get back on their feet. Finding housing in Toronto is difficult enough, but you may also be surprised to learn that many people who have experienced homelessness find it difficult to keep their housing once they've found it. We want housing for everyone, but how do we get there? Well, shelters haven't changed that much since the industrial era. Since then, we've learned a lot about how stress affects health, and something as simple as adding space between beds would add some privacy, improve sleep, and reduce theft. This is a small change, but it will improve dignity and it will reduce stress, thereby freeing service users to spend less energy surviving in the present and more energy focusing on the future. And what else? Well, we'll ask the service users. While the City of Toronto does invite and respond to feedback, there have not been any formal or in-depth reports on how shelters influence the rehousing and reintegration journeys of service users. Involving them in this process will give us critical insight on how we can be more effective. The next critical difference is that this program would include resources that shelters currently lack. Service users are expected to navigate a myriad of disconnected resources on their own. This is difficult enough under normal circumstances, let alone when burdened with the chronic stress of homelessness and the psychosocial factors that contribute to it. This new program would make these resources more accessible to service users by employing on-site caseworkers. Critically, these would include workers who specialize in immigration, mental health, and legal systems, all needs that are highly represented in Toronto shelters. And then, of course, it would also have resources that are increasingly common in current shelters, such as housing workers and harm reduction workers. Doctors, nurses, and mental health workers would make on-site visits from a community medical partner, such as St. Michael's Family Health Team. With all of these supports on site and a little more room to breathe, well, we'll probably get further, faster. And how about the money? This program would be funded by Social Enterprise. Our nonprofit organization will be funded by the city as a shelter, and by property development partners in the private sector. Profits from market rent buildings owned in whole or in part by our organization will be used to fund the shelter program. This will give us the freedom to provide services and resources not typically offered in shelters, along with the flexibility to adjust courses needed. It should also give possible investment options in the future. So, to review, our vision is to make a few small but important changes to the shelter model, making it safer and less stressful, reducing the psychosocial impact of homelessness, improving resource access, and ultimately improving health and housing outcomes. This could be evaluated through the frequency of service restrictions and discharges, which can be compared to more typical shelters, the number of clients successfully housed, and over time, the length of time that clients tend to remain housed. Of course, service user feedback will also be used to evaluate the program's overall suitability and effectiveness.